This video is for The Living Earth, Unit 2.2, Photosynthesis. Today's essential question: how are photosynthesis and cellular respiration related? First main idea: autotrophs and producers. Organisms, such as plants, that can photosynthesize are called autotrophs. Autotroph means self-nourisher. Autotrophs can make complex food substances from simple compounds. Plants use the simple compounds and energy from the sun to produce their food. Not only do autotrophs produce their own food, but they also store these prepared food substances. This provides an available source of chemical potential energy in the form of organic molecules that other organisms can consume. Autotrophs produce the food that provides energy to food chains. For this reason, autotrophs are also called producers.
Photosynthesis. Objective: to learn the process of photosynthesis. In order to live, all organisms require food sources that provide them with energy. Photosynthesis is a process during which light, usually from the sun, is converted into usable food for the organism. Plants are autotrophs, meaning they make their own food, and this food is made during the process of photosynthesis. The green color of their stems and many of their leaves comes from the greenish pigment chlorophyll. The cells of plants contain oval structures called chloroplasts. The chlorophyll is found inside these chloroplasts. Because of chlorophyll, plants, particularly the leaves, can absorb sunlight. But sunlight by itself is not all that's needed for the production of food. Let's take a closer look at the process of how plants are able to make their own food using sunlight during this process of photosynthesis. Roots will draw water from the soil and transport it to the leaves through the stem. The carbon dioxide from the air around us will enter the leaves through tiny openings called stomata. The chlorophyll in the leaves will absorb energy from the sunlight and use it to convert carbon dioxide and water into a food known as glucose, which is a kind of sugar. The glucose will provide energy that can be used by the plant. Along with glucose, oxygen and water vapor are also produced. The glucose remains in the plant, while the oxygen and water vapor will move out of the leaves through the stomata and into the atmosphere. If we wanted to represent photosynthesis as a chemical reaction, the process can be shown like this. Carbon dioxide plus water plus sunlight yields glucose plus oxygen plus water vapor. Photosynthesis is very important in nature, not just for plants, but also for animals and humans. This process allows plants to maintain normal levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere through the absorption of carbon dioxide and the release of oxygen. The energy produced through photosynthesis is transferred to animals who consume the plants. Herbivores are animals that eat only plants. A cow, for example, must eat grass to get its energy. Green algae also contain chlorophyll, and they too produce their food through photosynthesis. Because it is dependent on sunlight, photosynthesis can only occur during the daylight hours. Summary: photosynthesis is a process during which light, usually from the sun, is converted into usable food for the organism. Green plants have a green-colored pigment called chlorophyll. Water and carbon dioxide will react in the presence of sunlight to produce glucose oxygen, and water vapor.
Next main idea, the photosynthesis reaction. Like many chemical reactions, photosynthesis begins with a set of reactants, in this case, water and carbon dioxide, and uses energy to convert them into products, in this case, sugar and oxygen. Photosynthesis is therefore an endothermic or energy absorbing reaction. The energy for photosynthesis comes from sunlight. The word photosynthesis literally means using light to build. But how do plants capture solar energy for their use? What are the chemical reactants and products of this process? And how do the reactants differ from the products in terms of energy? Plants and other photosynthesizing organisms contain pigments that can absorb energy in the form of light. The main pigment in plant cells is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll absorbs most of the visible spectrum except green light, which it reflects, giving plants their green color. When chlorophyll absorbs light, it absorbs light energy. This light energy is then converted to chemical potential energy in the photosynthesis reaction. The reaction begins with water and carbon dioxide. These are converted to simple sugars and oxygen. The overall chemical reaction for photosynthesis is shown on the screen here. 6 CO2s plus 6 H2Os with the input of energy reacts to form one glucose molecule, which is C6H12O6, plus 6 O2s, which means for every molecule of glucose produced, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water are used. The carbon dioxide and water are the reactants, while the glucose and oxygen are the products. Notice that the amount of matter does not change, but rather rearranged. There are the same number of atoms on each side of the equation, making it balanced. This glucose may then be used to produce complex carbohydrates such as starches or cellulose. Comparing photosynthesis and cellular respiration.
Respiration and photosynthesis. Objective: to learn the processes of respiration and photosynthesis in plants. In order to live, all organisms must respire and require food sources that provide them with energy. In this session, we'll look at how plants create their own source of energy, and then what the energy is used for. Photosynthesis is a process during which light, usually from the sun, is converted into usable food for the organism. The roots of a plant will draw in water from the soil and transport it through the stem to the leaves. The carbon dioxide that is found in the air around us will enter the leaves through tiny pores called stomata. The chlorophyll in the leaves will absorb energy from the sunlight and use it to convert carbon dioxide and water into glucose, a kind of sugar that serves as a source of energy for the plant. The glucose remains in the plant while the oxygen and water vapor will move out of the leaves through the stomata and into the atmosphere. Because it is dependent on sunlight, photosynthesis can only occur during the daylight hours. But what happens with the glucose the plant has produced? It is utilized during respiration. Respiration is the process of taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. It is through this process that all living organisms take in the oxygen that is necessary for the oxidation of glucose. Plants, unlike animals, do not have any specialized organs for respiration. Oxygen from the atmosphere is absorbed through the stomata, the tiny pores we have already seen on the leaves, and it will diffuse into the spongy mesophyll tissue. The cells of the mesophyll contain mitochondria, which can be thought of as the powerhouses of the cell. In the mitochondria, the absorbed oxygen will react with the glucose created during photosynthesis to release energy, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. While the energy will be utilized by the plant, the carbon dioxide and water vapor will diffuse out through the stomata. Plants respire not only during the daytime, but also during the night. Summary: photosynthesis is a process during which light, usually from the sun, is converted into usable food for the organism. During photosynthesis, water and carbon dioxide will react in the presence of sunlight to produce glucose and oxygen. Respiration is a process during which oxygen is taken in to produce energy from food. During respiration, oxygen will be taken in and carbon dioxide and water vapor will be released.
The following table compares photosynthesis and aerobic cellular respiration. Photosynthesis and cellular respiration are therefore two parts of a never-ending cycle. The products of cellular respiration, which are carbon dioxide and water, are the reactants of photosynthesis, and vice versa. These two processes determine the amounts of carbon dioxide and oxygen in the air. At this point, you should be able to generate a full and appropriate response to today's essential question: how are photosynthesis and cellular respiration related?